Hello, everyone. Welcome to Two Wizards and a Mic, where we're going to talk about some stuff that's just absolutely. I'm looking forward to this one. But first, Kickstarter updates, or do we call them the other starter updates? The other
Well,
thing.
there is one. Actually, there are two Kickstarters still to finish. So the Mushroom King one is almost done. Everything is in the mail except for 10 books I'm going to order tomorrow. Then we'll
Excellent.
do our check of looking through to make sure people got their PDFs. The Rivenhelm book, the PDF should be finished this week or next week. And then we'll start organizing the printed books. And then the new one that was run on BackerKit, Ghosts, the Ghost Adventure, that manuscript is about 70% done. So it's going to be a little, maybe a couple more weeks or so. And I still have to get the maps for that to the cartographer. So yeah, pretty busy actually.
Say, because there's I hadn't actually considered when I said that about the past Kickstarters that have ended, but you're still finishing the fine details and things like that. So that's
Yeah.
actually kind of cool.
This is the hardcover of the Rise of the Mushroom King adventure. So this just arrived. So some people, only a few people ordered the hardcover for that book. More people, I think, ordered hardcovers for Rivenhelm and the Ghost book, the new one, and it looks really good. We weren't actually going to have a hardcover, but so many people still are interested, and it does look really good. So yeah,
Well, yeah, I mean, I know that when it comes to resource books for Dungeons and Dragons, I tend to gravitate towards the hardcovers.
mm,
I mean, I know there's tons of resources out there and adventures and things that never do hardcovers, but
mhm.
um, I did consider at one point one of the resource books that I've had since the 80s. The cover still looks okay, but you can tell the binding is, it's 40 years old. So I'm like, I looked up a bookbinder that's here in Vancouver, and I thought, if worst comes to worst, I could go there and say I need to rebind this, and that's what their specialty is, which is kind of nice.
Nice. Yeah, one reason we weren't planning on having hardcovers for the adventures was because we wanted them to be much like the original adventures modules. So that's why even the design of the cover with the picture here and then the text on the bottom, the logo, a lot of that is to um, make it quite like the original adventure. And then also the fact that we have color art on the cover and black and white in the interior. So yeah, but like I said, people wanted it, so we did it.
Nothing wrong with that at all. So, any other updates for the Kickstarters? That's it.
I guess the other thing is to mention we plan on doing one in June and one in November, and I'm really excited about those two stories. They're going to be more fantastical, and yeah, I already know quite a bit about what I want to do with those, so that's exciting.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. Um, so today's topic, though, is something that you mentioned. And I thought, what a cool idea. Um, which is basically playing 5e with a 1e style. And I actually pulled out some of my old, books of that era to kind of go, what does this mean? Like, what does this actually like? How do you take one rule set, or what can you take from an older rule set and bring forward into a newer one? Because in theory, the newer one is supposed to be better. That never goes wrong. But what is your thought on this particular subject?
Well, that's basically what we've done from the beginning since we started playing 5e, coming back to D&D, because I took a huge break, like 30, more than 30 years. So I only
Same.
really I know the original game and then I know 5e. I don't know anything in between. And people would ask me, over the last 10 years, what's your game like, or what are our books like? And I more and more, I said, we're playing 5e, but we play it 1e style and with 1e content. And we've talked about that a lot on this podcast. But one of the listeners said, why don't you do a whole show and kind of get a bit more into it? We're not going to go really deep. Like, if you want to change it so that the treasure is similar to the original game, and you want to make sure the players, aren't moving as much because the speeds are kind of sped up, especially with some of the
Yeah.
classes. Like a monk is just crazy, can run all over the place. Um, we're not talking about changing every single aspect. We're talking about having an overall um, theme and an overall style change and some content change to make it more like that. And the reason that I did that is because I find it more fun. But every table is different. Um, you know, there's a lot of great things about 5e. Like, I think mechanically it's such a great system, and it's smooth and it's simple. But I think it can be improved. And some of the ways that it can be improved is to go back and look at the original game. And there are some great things from 1E and from basic and, expert and AD&D from that time. There's some really good parts of the game that I would never stop using, and I haven't.
Yeah, no,
Um,
exactly.
the biggest thing that would be a way of changing 5e is that it's, for the players, it's a bit too easy, sometimes way too easy. And the way they've done that is they've made low-level player characters have a lot of abilities, or a lot of features, a lot of feats, and they've given overpowered magic items, and the PCs are really tough, and because of that, the game is not as challenging. It's not as deadly to the characters if you play straight 5e. There's ways to make it more challenging, and it doesn't take much to change it. The first thing is to use the hit points for the monsters and the enemy on the high end. So there's always a range um, in the monster books, and in our monster books, you're given an average for the hit points. I always lean towards the higher end when I'm DMing. And there's a bunch of magic items I never ever include in the game because I think the player characters are strong enough. They don't need, for example, unless they're really, much higher levels, they don't need a Vorpal sword and some of these crazy
That's
items
why
that,
I've never got one.
well, yeah, they should be reserved for higher levels, in my opinion. The other thing is using waves of monsters, not just one enemy, but having multiple monsters is much more challenging, especially because 5e PCs have so many attacks. That's a big change too.
Yeah, exactly. And there's times where just playing, you're like, we need to run away. We need to, like,
Yeah,
we're down to, like, we don't have any healing or very little healing. We don't have this, we don't have that. And of course, spellcasters are, like, I have one slot left.
yeah.
And yeah,
Well, that's
and,
a
and,
way.
and, and yeah, that definitely helps
That's a
to have
way
like
a
a break too.
dungeon master can tell, and a player can tell if the game is challenging. If players are not going down injured, if they're not, if they're, well, not players, if characters are, players might go down injured as well. Um, and if there aren't characters in trouble on a regular basis, fairly regular, and you're not using all your healing skills and potions and everything, then it's not that challenging. You need to have that element of the game to. I think it's more fun, and it makes the consequences mean something. And you have to. There's ways to make that happen in 5e, but you've got to kind of push it. Um, there's also rules you can have for extra effects for crits and crit misses, and we use those. So we roll a yes no dice if somebody gets a crit or a crit miss, And if you roll yes, that means there's extra effects. And then we have a large table that we roll with more consequential um,
Yeah, I
effects.
mean, that
It
is a
can,
great table like that kind of stuff. If you had never played D&D before and they joined your table, I don't think they would ever know that that's not a thing. Like if
yeah,
that was not part of the core game, that they would like, oh, you have to roll an extra. Okay, I've rolled a dice. Oh yes, no. Oh yes, okay, I got this extra thing, which also gives you that hidden feature you didn't know you needed, where a character suddenly can't speak, or a character
mhm,
dies, or a
mhm.
character, their leg is suddenly broken and they have to hobble. Their movement is cut in half or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I knew right away when I started playing so many years ago at your table that I thought, I don't remember this at all. What is this? But after a while, it didn't matter because it's like, it's not like you have to do it every single time. It's like only if you roll a certain thing, a couple things, and then you get to have a potential boon, like oh, I got a natural 20. All right, cool. Oh, yeah, the guy sets on fire too. Oh, cool. That's even better. You know, it just makes the game more interesting, I think.
Yeah, I think so. It gives more meaning to the automatic hit, the crit, and the miss. Um, yeah, I think it's quite fun. Like you said, we try to make the extra effects. There's some kind of minor ones, but there's some that are really, really meaningful. And yeah, I think it adds quite a bit. People are wondering what's going to happen because again, we leave it up to the dice to see what happens.
Exactly. And it
We've
also
adjusted it.
makes you change your play. If your character suddenly has some sort of hindrance, like wow. And
Yeah.
also I remember we were fighting somebody really high level, and I think my character, another character in the party, rolled a crit and then rolled really well on the big dice. And suddenly the villain was defeated, which I think for both the DM and the players was like, oh, I guess he's dead now. Okay. But you have to, like, that builds that idea that players have to think strategically. They have to actually do things like that. But also for the DM, like, oh, they've defeated a character that in theory should have taken them a bit longer to, but the dice blessed them. Awesome. And then the DM has to react and be like, okay, what happens next? That kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I remember that very clearly. You were not very high level. You were about third or fourth level, and there was a fairly powerful spellcaster that you encountered, and your character just happened to roll. You kind of charged him, rolled a natural 20, and then you rolled like basically 100 on the percentile chart, which in our extra effects is an automatic kill. That's it. They're done. And the thing about those two is they work both ways, right? So the monsters get the same rules
Exactly.
and the NPCs get the same rules. We've actually had way more NPCs get the auto kill than monsters. Um, you've, yeah, so you've had more companions and then more enemy NPCs have had those results for whatever reason. It's just happened like that. And then a few times we've had characters, I think once or twice at least, we've had characters who rolled that and they were done auto, you know. All right. And what this does when you make the game more challenging for the characters is this forces the second point, which I have, it forces the players to be more strategic because you have to consider how you're using your resources more, like ammunition and food and like rations and water. They mean something now because it's a more deadly environment. So you better make sure you have arrows for your bow. You better make sure you have rations. And there's consequences when you're not doing reconnaissance, when you're not checking out an area. Um, the clearest example I can remember is when you found out about a flying castle that these bandits were using, and you just decided to get into this castle and attack. And you did no recon, like no, you didn't check out the castle or the bandits or even wander around, kind of check to think. You just went straight to the throne room, basically. And it turned out that the leader of the bandits was a beholder. And
This
that
I
didn't all go
remember.
well. Hmm?
I do remember that, and I'm still feeling dumb for having done it. But yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? That actually proved that you need to think about how you're going to deal with encounters, especially when you're given planning time. That's the other thing, is that sure you can react to a sudden appearance of a creature or whatever, but in terms of going from point A to point B, if you're given the time, you really need to use it because I think players can forget that they're supposed to realize they're in a living, breathing world. And if the DM thinks that they're just kind of rushing towards the big bad, that they could throw things in the way. Or they could reward you if you guys, okay, we see the castle, it's right there. Let's take it. Let's maybe we should sit here overnight and rest and just watch, see what's happening, who's coming in and out, like that kind of thing. And
Hmm.
then, you know, going around the outside of the throne room to actually discover what's going on inside, rather than just be like, "We're here," and like we're
Yeah.
not Aragorn walking into Helm's Deep. We are players that have limited resources,
Hmm.
and because you wouldn't do that in real life, you wouldn't just storm the castle.
Some people do.
Yeah, well, yeah, true.
Um, so the other thing with it becoming more challenging and more strategic, um, you know, basically planning needed, is that henchmen for you and for the enemy become more important. Always, as I said, waves of enemies are more challenging. The higher level game can have very clever henchmen as well and villains, which is very challenging. And then to make the game easier for you in this kind of environment, it's a very good idea to hire henchmen. So this used to be a big part of the game, and there was a reason why. And it kind of fell out of the game, well, for sure with 5e. And I think it's a really important part. It can really make the difference in your adventure if you have a few people to carry more of your goods and your equipment. And again, when you have multiple enemies, it helps to have multiple allies.
Yeah, I kind of regret that we don't try to do that more often. I mean, at your table, we have opportunities for all kinds of NPCs to help us out. And generally, they're friendly, they help us out, great. Um, but being able to defeat a big bad who has their own henchmen, I kind of think, wouldn't it be cool if we actually stopped at the local pub and said, hey, who wants to storm the castle with us? You might find one or two characters willing to be like, am I going to get paid? Yeah, totally. All right, I'm in. Just to give it some flavor. But we don't do that a lot. Granted, organically, we tend to find helpers and NPCs that are willing to risk everything. But yeah,
Yeah, I'd say you usually do it at mid and high levels, but you don't do it as much at first level or early levels that you as you could. But we'll see. The new group is more old school, so they probably will start to do this. Once they see how many minions and enemies they're going to be facing, they're going to probably think about that.
sure.
Another point is to use less races and classes. A lot of times, with many things in life, less is more. It gives more meaning to what you do have, and it makes the classes that you do have and the races that you do have stand out more and be more defined. The new version of 5e, like like the 2024 version, is pushing even more towards these classes where they're and races where they're basically all the same, very similar. They all have dark vision. Most of the classes have some healing and some magic. I think it's better if you cut it down. You could easily take out the warlock, um, potentially the monk and sorcerer, barbarian. Um, yeah, I think there's more than enough classes. I think you could take a few out, and also the races. We don't need to have every single kind of humanoid. Like, oh, I'm a cat man, I'm a bird man, I'm a tiger man, I'm a lizard man. um, I think it's more fun when there's more defined, more interesting, um, more archetypal monsters and races. Like there's so much depth to what an elf is, or a dwarf, or a halfling, or a gnome. But there's not much depth to, oh, I'm a cat person, lizard person, tiger person, whatever. Um, Centaur. Yeah, there's a genius idea that somebody came up with. Um, the first dungeon you get to, oh, you guys just go ahead. I can't actually go anywhere in there. I'll be waiting outside. So I think to cut down the races and classes is a good idea and make it more like classic um, 1E. It actually makes it more fun.
That's awesome.
Another traditional element is to use traditional monsters. Again, other than adding the Cawood Publishing monsters, um, some some of these monsters are just basically they're redoing the same monster over and over, exactly the same. In some of these monster books, because there's a few of them now. But I think using the classic monsters and, of course, Archetypes publishing monsters, um, it actually does help, especially if you use a lot of the traditional ones. And in our books, actually, we have leaned on the traditional and folklore in terms of the monsters. And again, they get more definition. They don't start all looking the same. And a lot of them represent a really powerful archetype, an important archetype, like the orc or the goblin. Those really represent these evil elements of archetypes. The dragon, too, powerful archetype that's going to be with, these are going to be with us, 1,000 years from now, and they were there 1,000 years ago. So I think leaning towards more of those as opposed to um, some of the some of the silly well, some silly stuff is good, but it can get out of hand. Um, so I think to focus more on the classic elements, I think is a lot of fun. And then my final point was about the themes. So again, looking at archetypes, there's a modern trend, which hopefully is ending now, where every hero is an anti-hero, and the edgy story is the anti-hero, and heroes who aren't really heroes. Well, now it's so played out, which is going to happen because it's playing against archetype, playing against type. It's so played out that every story is like that. The girl boss who can do everything. Um, the kid who's like, chosen one who can't be defeated. And there's a reason why the great stories like Tolkien's books and the Chronicles of Narnia and J.K. Rowling and some of the other classics, the um, Conan stories, these books are still popular, still loved. Um, the following behind Lord of the Rings is just unbelievable how enormous it is across the world. And there's a reason why. Same with the original Star Wars story, um, the original Indiana Jones story, because they're traditional heroic fantasy. And it was good, when it started, and it's still good. And that's got a way bigger following than some bad show on Amazon that's got tons of money but no soul to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was reading an article not too long ago about the film Star Wars Rogue One, and they were talking about how the writers actually sat down and said, we've got all these other projects on the way, which at the time was like Solo and a bunch of other. There was supposed to be a Yoda movie and all these things. And the when they hired the director said, you know, we need to make a Star Wars movie that is not like the 2015, like the first, like with the Force Awakens. He didn't want that. He wanted, I want to make that the 70s based film, and I want it to be about the people in the universe. I don't want it to be about Jedis. I don't want it to be about this or that. All of that stuff has its place in the main big huge film storyline. We're doing a one-off story, and I want it to be real. I want it to be 360 cameras, like the characters can wander through sets and it would be like a real place. And I appreciated that a lot. Like they had a lot of stuff that at the very beginning was trying to do something new and trying to use the archetypes and trying to like, but have them on a smaller scale. Instead of a Jedi, it's a kid who's the daughter of the guy who designed the Death Star. Like these kinds of things. You had these characters that had these family tensions and da 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 da. And yeah, I like that a lot. I thought it was good.
Yeah,
But you
that's
know,
exactly it. Because you can do something new, but the foundation still has to be in something real and in real elements of stories and real archetypes. So, Lucas was in the 70s making the first Star Wars, and his inspiration was a lot of these matinee movies and adventure movies in the 50s, I guess it would have been. But there, those things, and actually on some Japanese adventure movies like Kurosawa movies, but all those things that he was inspired by were based on older, timeless archetypes. It wasn't a 70s thing that he was doing, like in term other than maybe some of the clothing or the
yeah,
haircut.
exactly.
But it was based on something timeless. And so there's a gap here in knowledge for writers and actors, but especially writers who don't understand how these archetypes work, and they're just trying to they're basically, like I said again, trying to go against type, but they don't understand what the type is and that there's a meaning behind it, you know?
Yeah, because actually, I'm glad you mentioned earlier about the whole girl boss thing, where uh, I read an analysis of there was a TV show called Girl Boss or something, but um, and they did it. They actually did a very decent deep dive into that because at the time I thought that sounds interesting, but you know, I'm not totally sold on watching this program. And their analysis actually confirmed that I shouldn't have watched it because uh, it was written in such a way where girl boss meant I'm going to be an asshole to everybody. And they were going to, you know, the character was rude and was fighting against type or whatever that might have been. But it seemed that the reality was that, and I've seen this in people too, where they're fighting for the sake of fighting. They perceive something that's not real, or is maybe a touch real, uh, but they don't pause long enough to go, okay, well, what do I do in a constructive, you know, non-destructive way? Like, how could I do this without just becoming a dick? And yeah, and it's totally the same in any writer's room these days, as far as I can tell, that they haven't played enough D&D to understand what a class is, what a thing is, whatever, um, because they never read The Hero with a Thousand Faces or a bunch of books that talk about this stuff. They haven't read the Odyssey. That bugs me that people have not read the. They're like, whatever, it's a poem. Well, it's a story, but it's where a lot of this stuff was born. This is where this knowledge came from. And if you don't if you don't listen to, you know, rock music from a certain era that gave birth to other rock music that we would know today, or but then you look at that old rock music and oh wait a minute, it actually came from this style of music from 1710 or whatever. there's all of these things that build upon that have been around for a long time. And if you don't learn those basics, then you make Willow, the TV show, which was the best opportunity to create a D&D like adventure with an established world, and they just ignored. You could tell the writers had not watched the movie or
Mhm.
something, or didn't understand that yes, Willow back in 1980, whatever, 4 or 5, was a goofy film, but it was great at world building, it was great at character building, and you enjoyed the film because of those things, not because of the action, not because of the this or that, but because you would see the world in a great in a very clear way with archetype characters coming in, the hero, the hero, the heroine, all these characters coming together to do this thing against the big evil thing that had henchmen. And I watched that show thinking, oh my god, this is going to be amazing, and they just did not respect the source material,
Mhm.
and didn't learn about any of the stuff that we've talked about, like about the archetypal realm, and which is built into our DNA.
Mhm.
Like, so yeah, so sad.
Yeah,
Old
and it's
old
interesting.
school is still cool.
Yeah. Well, and old school really, in a way, has become new school because new school has just a lot of it is like we've had like I'm not kidding. It seems like we've had 20 years of terrible movies, for the most part. Better TV, but also some pretty bad TV too. And yeah, they have it's just a lack of education, really, and one on one level. And it's interesting how when they go against type and they don't understand archetypes and they're making these fantasy movies, that they end up usually making villains. That's what it ends up being. And it's not going to last. Like, this stuff is not going to last. 100 years from now, people are still going to watch the original Star Wars and go, wow. And the original Indiana Jones and Lord of the Rings movies. And nobody's going to watch the Willow TV series won't even be around. They're probably not even going to keep.
It's not around now. It
Yeah, like
was
they
so
probably
bad.
erased it. They probably erased it from the computer.
Delete.
Like that.
And
And
yeah,
and there's a reason why. Like the Willow TV series will be gone, Rings of Power will be gone.
the new
Maybe
Snow White
even,
will be gone.
sorry, Snow
The new
White. Yeah.
Snow White.
Oh yeah, they're just going to erase these because there's nothing to it. There's no substance to it. So yeah, it's interesting because in a way, my philosophy of adding 1E, fusing it into 5E, is a similar process because it's putting to me it's putting some substance into it. And yeah, like putting grounding it, because there's, again, I think the player characters are a bit too strong. There's too many races and classes. Too many classes have magic. I didn't mention that, but we've made a non-magic ranger, and I've got a version of a bard and a paladin that don't have magic either, which I'll put out sometime. I think at this point I'm just going to start actually releasing some content for free because um, yeah, I'm not going to get around to organizing some of it into books, because our main focus now is to make adventures. So I think I'm just going to release those for free. But yeah, I like the idea of removing magic from a lot of the classes. Like, why can't spellcasters just have magic? Just give it to the wizard, sorcerer, if you're going to have a sorcerer, cleric, and druid. Just give it to them. But why does a paladin have magic and a ranger and a bard? Makes no sense.
Well, it also takes away from the strategy side of it, where if you have characters that have certain specialties, which in reality people have certain specialties, they're good at this, they're good at that, they're not very good at that. Like,
Mhm.
why can't you have that reflected in our gaming? Because um, it then allows you to go, okay, guys, we're going up against XYZ, and then you hope that the people playing their characters will be like, okay, I'm really good at healing, or I'm really good at ranged attacks, or I'm really good at being up close, like, and actually be able to move the that around the battle map, so you're actually hopefully gaining an advantage, because you know that the DM is going to think as strategically as possible to say, okay, well, I'm not just going to take, all right, 8 orcs, go. Like, no, no, you're going to be like, okay, this orc has got a ranged attack, so whatever it might be, and I'm going to put them over here, and I'm going to have these guys go into the fray, and I'm going to have these ones from a distance, and they're going to have healing, and la da 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 da. Like, all of it happens, right? So I think it just takes away from the game in that respect of not having strategy. If everyone can do everything.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely like the idea of the classes being unique and having something special. Even like the lucky feat in 5e, I got rid of that right away. I'm like, that you've just given it as to halflings as something special, and now you're just gonna let anybody have it. Um, so yeah, yep.
Well, I certainly hope that we've gone into some depth on this particular topic. Are there any sort of things you want to say about the Kickstarters? Have you run out of information right now?
You mean information to give out?
Yeah, like, are you going to promise right now here on the show that, yeah, there's a bunch of things I'm going to start giving away for free that I've created just for people
Yeah, no,
who
I
want to play
definitely
a
will
game?
do that. I will release the no magic bard and the no magic paladin. I think I might even make some monsters that I can release. And yeah, I've looked. I was thinking about doing this. I did talk to some of my followers about that earlier this year, and people are into it, and also into us getting a newsletter out. It's just a question of time.
Oh, exactly. I
um,
mean, you
so
have so many things going on, like, I don't know, raising a daughter, uh, you know, negotiating the world. I mean, like everybody else. And it's funny because the thing I always picture is like you over a table, just like moving pieces around, not painting them, and then writing down like ideas you've got for new content and things like that. But I
Mhm.
know that's not true. But you have a full life, man.
I do, but funnily enough, I do have books like everywhere. I have a book in the car, a book, in the living room. I have books everywhere where I'm always writing and putting ideas down. So that is true. That is not just made up. That is 100% true. Um, yeah.
Well, you have to, because the best tool that I've learned about D&D and gaming in general is a piece of paper and a pencil. And if you are running around, I've got to take the child to activity Y, and we're gonna I'll do. And if you're at a stoplight, or if you're waiting to pick somebody up or whatever, yeah, pick up the book, have some ideas you had in your head, just write them down to get them out, so that you can remember them later on. Because
Yeah.
that's always the curse of creativity, is that
Oh
it's like,
yeah.
oh, that's a great idea. Phone rings, blah, blah, blah. Hang up the
Yeah.
phone. Oh my God, what was that idea? I can't remember now. Yeah.
No, it's true. And actually, that's one of the only apps that I do use on the phone sometimes. I rarely use any kind of app or anything, but there is the notes one that I do sometimes use if I don't have a book with me. I will sometimes use that, and then yeah, no, it's true. You don't want to come up with the great idea that just floats into your head and then it floats out again.
Gone. Exactly.
So
Well, thank you everybody for listening, for watching, and of course, everything that we've talked about and everything that we want you to get access to are going to be down. I was going to say downstairs, down below, and of course, yeah, the Rise of the Mushroom King. Look at that; it's so gorgeous. Can't complain. Look at that. Ah, beautiful. But yeah, so we'll see you all next time. And if you have any questions and or anything else, get a hold of us and let us know what you want us to talk about. Uh, Active on the socials and all of that fun stuff. Bye,
later.
everybody.